Hello and welcome. My name is Andy Salkeld, and this is my Start Competing 40k series, one beginner to another. Last time we talked about motivation and reasons for playing, benefits for playing in competitive Warhammer 40k. Today we're going to be talking about the atmosphere of events. So this is it's not logistical things, and it's more to do with kind of expectations of people and environments. So there are numerous shapes and sizes of events, but most of them are typically 3 to 9 rounds across 1 to 3 days. Obviously, if you're starting, it might be better to start at a 1-day event with 3 rounds rather than jumping into, say, a 7 to 9 round event over 2 to 3 days, just to kind of experience what it's like before diving in the deep end. My first event, I was signed up to go to a 2-day event, 6 rounds. However, I was so anxious about going to that, I decided to go to a 1-day event the week before, just so that I had experienced it first to kind of overcome my anxiety and so on. However, when you end up going to these events, one of the things I talked about last time and is important to understand is there are probably 1 to 10 people in the room who go in with the expectation of winning the event because they want to win for whatever reason. And what that means is most people realize that they're not in contention for winning. Or as soon as they take a loss, they are no longer in contention for winning. And what happens then is all those people are very chill about the results. They want to play good games against good opponents and just have fun and experience and enjoy playing the game. They're not win at all cost mentality. They're not trying to assert dominance or anything like that. They just want to play nice games in a chill environment with fun people, etc. It's a lot less emotionally charged than you would expect, and it's often very relaxed. Across all my games, all my tournaments that I've been to over the last 6 months, I've had one bad experience, and that was the end of a 2-day event, game 6, when we were both tired, ready to go home. And even then, it wasn't that bad. And we just there was frustration, but it was still fine. Now that we've kind of got that covered, the next area is what is the atmosphere like? Now, often there are a lot of people, particularly depending on the size of events. This could go up to, typically smaller events, 1 day, 32 people. However, getting into larger events could be 100, 200, 600, 800, etc. And the venue will be of an appropriate size to enable that many games to occur. But it's to understand that there is a lot of people, which means there is a lot of heat in the room. There is a lot of background noise and other noise in the room, and everything that goes with that. So body odor, kind of loud noises, crashes, bangs, tannoy announcements, everything like that. Now that sounds pretty bad, but actually it's not as bad as it is. The heat can be tough, but most tournaments are very aware of it now, which means that they will keep doors open, they will find ventilation systems, they will have fans, everything. They'll do what they can to keep the room cool. Body odor side of things, most people, there has been a huge work. Everyone now brings kind of deodorant with them. People are very accustomed to just wearing shorts and breathable t-shirts because that allows people to cool down quicker, which means there is less sweat, less smell, etc. I recommend doing the same, but it can still be there. They're often more humid. Water is often provided, so just keep yourself cool, look after yourself in these environments. The noise is something to be aware of. I myself struggle with sensory overload at times. So this is where there is lots of noise, or particularly of different pitches, and it can be challenging in those sorts of environments. However, the thing to remember is you're going to be playing a game with one person. And that means essentially you're going to be having a 3-hour direct, or 2.5 hour, 3-hour directed conversation with that person. So a lot of the background noise does really become background noise. So try to focus on your game and your conversation with your opponent. Now, with all these people, with all the people in these rooms, you would think that it might be quite tight and claustrophobic. It's actually quite the opposite, because games are played on 60 by 44 tables. These are often laid out with channels in between them to allow you to walk up and down, and it's actually quite airy and quite open. As someone who struggles with claustrophobia at times, I was nervous about this as well. And as soon as you see it, you're like, actually, there is quite a lot of room here. It is harder when you are playing in the middle of a block of 3. So when there's 2 games either side, because obviously you can't walk around as much. But if you are on an edge, then it's very easy to just walk around and kind of and interact, have space around you. Also, whilst we're talking about it, most places have tables with with mats and terrain on them, and they come with chairs. One thing I can 100% say now is remember to sit down, otherwise you'll be stood up for potentially 9 hours straight. And if you've ever worked in retail, you will know the damage that can do to your shins, etc. So please take the time to sit down when you can. With all these things, if you are concerned about them for whatever reason, reach out to the tournament organizer. Drop them an email beforehand, speak to them on the day, and then kind of go from there. Most TOs will try to accommodate situations like this. So at some venues, some local game stores, they might be able to have you play on a particular table that gives you more space, more room, it's quieter, etc., etc. Just mention it in advance if you're struggling. They'll do what they can. One thing, when you arrive, figure out where the bathrooms are. There could be hundreds of people all trying to use bathrooms. Make sure you know where they are. There's often better or worse times to go to the bathroom. Typically, right at the beginning of a round, or as soon as you finish your game, are the best times to go, because either everyone's setting up their game, or you might finish before the time is up, and therefore you can go before there's a rush. Just be aware of it. It's just something to think about. If you get lost, if you don't know where things are, ask. There are going to be a lot of people in the same situation as you, and many of them will be able to help and do what they can. So, the next bit. What do people expect of you at an event? Now, I can only speak from my experiences, but most people I've come across all have similar expectations of just wanting a good game and just wanting a fun and interactive game. But, and this is important, games are timed. This means you will have 2.5 to 3 hours, the typical time limits, to play a game of 40k. If you play on the tabletop with friends and things like that, sometimes games can spread out. They can last, say, 4 or 5 hours, particularly in a beer and pretzels environment. And just be aware that you have to kind of learn to condense that down. And it's not that hard. A lot of this just comes from knowing rules, being slightly quicker, being more precise, and as we'll come on to at the end, playing to intent. And what this also means is some tournaments may ask you to play on a chess clock, which means passing time back and forth, and there's rules associated to that. And then the next thing is what's included in that. You will need to set up your terrain. When you arrive at your table, the mission won't be set up and the terrain may not be set up. So you'll need to lay down your objective markers and set up the terrain and talk your opponent through your army and then play the game. And all of that is included within the time limit of the round. There's no kind of leeway for the extra bits. So this has a few knock-on effects. Firstly, know your rules or index your codex as best you can. Try to make shortcuts and cheat sheets, notes, anything like that. I'm going to cover this in detail in episode 5 on preparation, but it's just one of those things that a lot of time can be lost flicking through a book, looking for the answers or that one stratagem that'll help you win. It's not like that. Try to just have things available to you quickly so that you're not losing time looking at other things. The other thing, or the other huge part of this game that is important to go into a tournament prepared for, is that this is a dice game. This is a game with variance inherently built into it. You'll be rolling lots of dice, and as much as averages and expected values do weigh out in the end, they may not weigh out in the dice rolls as they happen. Because of dice rolling and because of this variance, it's important to try and show your roll your dice visibly for your opponent to see, so that they can have confidence that you are not saying something that didn't happen, and vice versa. There is a lot of trust in this game. There is a lot of variance in this game, and it's important to try and create a very kind of welcoming environment. What I do is I always try to have a dice tray that I roll into, and I will always roll my dice into that, and I'll try to have it in the middle of a table to just be kind of like, here you go. With variance comes the acceptance of variance. You can roll a lot of dice and you can roll extremely hot or extremely poorly, and same can happen for your opponent. And it's important to try and not bring emotion into that. Yes, bad things happen or good things happen, but it's about accepting it and just being like, well, that's what it is. I need to learn to adapt or adjust in this new environment. This can be very hard, particularly for people who come from card games where they expect where there is slightly lower variance. There's no dice, it's just drawing from the deck. And people are used to kind of ways of smoothing that. And there isn't a lot of that in 40k. So what I would advise in this is try not to feel bad yourself. Definitely try not to make your opponent feel bad for their dice rolls. And learn to enjoy the kind of the success and the happiness of your opponent. If you're able to say to them, that was incredible, that was a great dice roll, that made the difference, then suddenly they'll be like, one, it will create a more friendly environment, but two, it will mitigate any negative feelings they have. As someone who plays with mechanics like exploding sixes and so on, I know how bad it feels when I roll all my dice and then maybe with re-rolls and kind of 50% of them come up sixes and my opponent is like, well, that's a bit extreme. And it's like, I feel bad about rolling so high above average, but again, it's not something I can control and it's not something they can control, and taking any emotion out of that is very important. One of the other things to be aware of is to try not to gotcha your opponent, or to be gotcha'd by your opponent. And what happens with this is it's basically about talking through what the options are. Ask your opponent, do you have access to this? Can you do that? But also remind them, Are you aware I can do this? Are you aware I have that? Etc. etc. And this leads into the most important part of this, which is playing by intent. And what I mean by playing by intent is we play with toy models on small bases. These are put on inaccurate representations on boards that get knocked, nudged, moved, everything like that. Then we stand about a meter away from them in height, and we try to measure using a tool that is 6 inches to a foot away from where they are positioned. Everything that we do on the tabletop is an estimate. Sadly, that is just part and parcel of it. We have to accept it's our best estimate, but it's an estimate. So nothing is precise, so everything comes down to trust. What happens with this is people talk about what their intent is. So I may not be able to accurately measure that my model is precisely 1 inch back from a wall, because trying to get in under the terrain with a measuring stick, etc., it just becomes a nightmare. So what happens is people place them as best they can and say, my intent here is, do you agree this is possible? Most people will just say, yep, I agree with that. Similarly, I've measured where your tank can go. You've told me it's 12-inch move. Therefore, it could get to here, which means its line of sight is here. Therefore, I'm positioning behind this line. My intent is that you won't be able to shoot me with this tank. Do you agree? And the important part in all of this is that final statement, do you agree? Ask your opponent, involve them in the conversation, tell them what you're thinking, ask if there's anything you haven't thought of, and in general, in every game I've experienced, everyone will share. So I play Sisters of Battle or Adeptus Sororitas, I have miracle dice, I have my command points, I always make them visible. If I'm ever showing something that represents a deep strike charge or a long charge, I will say to them, this is my maximum threat range. I could deep strike and charge you using these dice. I could do X, Y, and Z. And I give them the full information available. And as strange as this sounds, this is a very spiky personality trait, because what I am wanting to prove, as we talked about in the last episode, is I'm wanting to prove that I can win when you have full information. I want to prove that without me trying to gotcha or surprise you with something, that I am still able to win given the full information of knowledge. Now, I may not win, but I would rather it be an equal footing than an unequal footing. Now, this takes time and practice to get into, where you talk about what you're doing, and it just basically involves practice and time. And try it. Try when you are playing with your friends in your garage or on the kitchen table. Just try and talk about what you're doing. My intent is, my plan is, and see how they respond. See what it's like. Ultimately, everyone just wants a good game of Warhammer 40,000. You're going to be spending 2 to 3 hours with this person, and making that awkward and uncomfortable doesn't serve anyone's purpose. So try to have a good time, try to speak honestly, openly, share what you can do, ask them what they can do, and just create a good environment that's welcoming. Most people I have played against do exactly the same. They create a good environment, they talk about what they're doing, they talk about how they're doing it, what their plans are, how they can do X, Y, and Z to me, and I'm like, cool. And we just reciprocate, and we just try to create the most inclusive and welcoming environment that we can. So anyway, that is the end of episode 2. This one's run on a bit. I didn't expect it to go this long, but it's important to cover these things. As I'm new to this, as I'm kind of getting ready and recording all these, and new to YouTube, I kind of feel I should be saying the whole follow, like, subscribe, everything, because it does, I'm not worried about monetization or anything like that. What I'm bothered about is knowing whether people like these and listen to them. because if they like them, if they want to know more about me as an anxious wargamer, etc., and how I've gone through this, what my tournament reports are like, etc., then I will gladly keep sharing them. But it's about knowing that people are enjoying them and liking them. So anyway, please feel free to do any of that, and I'll be back next week where we're going to talk about the event as a whole. So thank you very much, and I'll see you then.